Oda really cooked up one of his best character reveals yet with the introduction of Prince Loki in chapter 1130, along with that jaw-dropping spread of Elbaf and all of its massive, glorious detail. I mean, that spread, chef's kiss. But for dessert, we got a real treat, some juicy details about Loki's rap sheet. And let me tell you, the man's got some serious nicknames. We're talking the accursed prince, the shame of Elbaf. If it were me, I wouldn't exactly want to be the guy clowned as the shame of an entire country that gave us 2 bounty monsters at 1.8 billion berries each. So, what's the deal with Loki? His patricide of the former King Harold, his father, feels like a textbook power move. He killed his own dad to grab Elbaf's legendary devil fruit and supposedly wants to go on and destroy the world under the title of Sun God, which, good luck, I guess, because if anybody's going to destroy anything under that title, it's Luffy. Madame Charlie already called it. But in a surprising, yet not in a surprising Luffy fashion, is Luffy's interaction with Loki in this chapter. Because right off the bat, Luffy got a weird, off-putting vibe from Loki. So, of course, what does our boy do? He branches off from the crew to run a little vibe check on Loki. But here's the thing. Luffy's emotional intelligence really shines through here. He's nonchalant about Loki. He knows there's something more to this so-called accursed prince than meets the eye, I feel like. And honestly, same with me. What if Loki's actions weren't just about grabbing power? There could be something way deeper going on with this guy. So in this video, we're going to dive into 3 reasons why Loki might not be the villain everyone thinks he is. Understanding this guy could be the key to unraveling the future of the Elbaf arc and where the story is heading as we gear up for chapter 1131 in the next 2 weeks. Let's set the stage for what's really going on with Loki. On the surface, this guy has all the markings of a classic villain. He kills his father, King Harold, to seize Elbaf's legendary devil fruit, and now he's imprisoned by his own people, being called the accursed prince and the shame of Elbaf. I mean, when you hear those nicknames, it's easy to assume that this guy's a piece of shit. But let's take a step back and think about what's really at play here. We are talking about Elbaf, home to the strongest warriors in the world. And as far as we all know, the world government is always on the lookout for powerful forces or threats that they can either control or destroy. Elbaf with the giants is definitely on their radar. So, what if Loki's whole act as the villain isn't really about seizing power, but about protecting Elbaf from something far worse? What if the world government was behind King Harold's death rather than Loki himself? So let's entertain the idea that Loki is playing the villain as part of a larger plan to keep the giants from making any reckless moves against the world government. If the giants were to openly challenge the world government, they'd put their entire kingdom in jeopardy. And here's where it starts to come together. See, it took Elbaf's strongest warriors to capture him and lock him away. That's a huge deal. Why would Loki let himself be defeated by his own warriors? Sure, it's probably because going up against the strongest warriors of Elbaf would even be a challenge to somebody like Loki. But think about it. By doing this, Loki ensures that Elbaf's warriors are focused on him, instead of being tempted to start a fight that they can't win against the world government. And it's like he's becoming the scapegoat for the entire country, intentionally making himself the enemy to keep the giants united against him, rather than focusing on the real, much more dangerous threats outside of their borders. Now, let's take this one step even further. What if someone in Elbaf knows the truth behind Loki's actions? What if Loki has a close ally, maybe Hadruden or another giant, who understands that Loki's playing a role to protect the kingdom? Because remember how Nojiko in the Arlong Park arc, she knew the truth about Nami's plan to free their village from Arlong, but kept it secret because Nami asked her to. And I can see something similar happening here, where an Elbaf giant knows Loki's real motives, but is staying silent to honor the promise to keep the kingdom safe. And this ally would obviously be Loki's silent supporter, helping maintain the fragile peace within Elbaf, while Loki takes all the heat from King Harold's death. It's a smart move by creating this narrative where Loki is the shame of Elbaf, diverting all the anger and frustration away from the world government, keeping the giants from stepping into a war they're not prepared for. And look, this is a new territory for One Piece. We've seen rulers like King Cobra, King Riku, and Gonfall get framed, ousted, or defeated because of the actions of antagonists pulling the strings behind the scenes. But what makes Loki's situation unique is that it seems like he's the one orchestrating his own downfall, taking on the role of the villain on purpose to protect Elbaf from something much bigger. And I think Oda seems to be preparing us for the reveal that Loki is not the villain everyone believes he is. In fact, he might be Elbaf's greatest protector at the moment, using his villain persona as a shield to keep his people safe from the world government. And it sounds risky, but I think it's probably the only way he could think to protect his kingdom from getting caught in the crosshairs of even more dangerous enemies. Now, something else we haven't touched on yet is the truth behind his father's death. On the surface, it looks like Loki killed King Harold to get his hands on the devil fruit. But what if there's more to it than that? What if the man marked by flames was the one pulling the strings? And this is where things really get interesting, and we'll dive into that next. We know that the fourth row poneglyph, the last key at this point to finding Laugh-Tale, was originally located in Fishman Island about 20 years ago. And at some point, it was moved, and I'm willing to bet that it was moved to Elbaf, which would be a fitting location given the Giants' reputation as the strongest warriors in the world. And guarding the row poneglyph in such a powerful nation would make sense, as the Giants would be capable of defending it from outside threats. And speaking of guarding the row poneglyph, let's talk about King Harold, the former ruler of Elbaf, who would have been the strongest choice to protect it, I assume. Since his son is named Loki, a clear reference to the Norse god, it wouldn't be surprising if Oda drew inspiration for King Harold's character from Odin, especially because of his connection through his son. In Norse mythology, Odin is famous for his magical ring Draupnir, which can replicate itself endlessly. This concept of endless replication could be reflected in the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf, which, like all devil fruits, reincarnates after its user dies. In Elbaf's royal family, this devil fruit could be reincarnated into an apple. And I say apple because in Japanese, the word for apple is ringo, which through wordplay, you can stretch it and interpret it as the English word ring. This connection ties back to the symbolic concept of the Draupnir ring and aligns with Oda's tendency to use wordplay in the story. And additionally, apples hold symbolic importance in Norse mythology, as they are associated with immortality and are believed to provide the gods with eternal youth until the end of the world. So I imagine that each king of Elbaf may have carried an apple on their person, ensuring that when they died, the devil fruit reincarnates into that apple, preserving the power within the royal line generation after generation. But since we've been talking of Elbaf as the protector of the last poneglyph, why is it in the possession of another individual? This brings us to the man marked by flames, believed to hold the final row poneglyph. But how did he get it? Mr. Morge recently put out a really solid theory about the God's Knight's potential role in Elbaf. Essentially, he proposes that the man marked by flames and the new leader of the God's Knights, replacing Figurling Garling, who was promoted to join the Gorosei, are the same person. As far as we understand, the God's Knights are completely capable of not only taking on powerful pirates, but they are also tasked with ensuring the downfall of any threats against the world government, such as the Revolutionary Army, which could explain the man marked by flames' involvement in procuring the royal poneglyph by potentially stealing it from Elbaf as part of his mission to safeguard the world government's secrets. It would have been his duty to retrieve the poneglyph before it could fall into the hands of pirates, and potentially expose the hidden truths of the Void Century. This makes him a very significant obstacle for Luffy and other pirates as they draw closer to Laugh-Tale and the One Piece. If the man marked by flames is the new leader of the God's Knights and has stolen the royal poneglyph from Elbaf, it's likely that a confrontation occurred between him and King Harold with Loki by his side, and this battle probably resulted in King Harold being mortally wounded and the poneglyph being taken, obviously. And by the way, it would be pretty cool if the reason he is called the man marked by flames is that if King Harold burned him using the power of the legendary devil fruit. Aside from that though, King Harold may have entrusted Loki with the apple in his last moments, ensuring that the legendary devil fruit would reincarnate within it, and with his final act, Harold would have passed down both the power of the fruit and the responsibility of protecting Elbaf to his son. Therefore, Loki would have inherited his will. However, what followed was not a typical succession. So after King Harold's death, obviously the kingdom would have been thrown into grief and uncertainty. The loss of their king would be a devastating blow, and Loki, in an attempt to shield his people from further danger with the world government, could have made the fateful decision to take the blame for his father's death, claiming that he legit killed him with his own hands and stole the devil fruit. By accepting this responsibility, Loki became the shame of Elbaf and the accursed prince. But why would he do this? Well, like I said, I think Loki's actions were motivated by his desire to protect Elbaf from an even greater threat posed by the God's Knights and the world government. And at the time, Loki might have thought that the God's Knights and the world government were forces that even the warriors of Elbaf would struggle to defeat. And so by assuming the role of the villain, Loki would provide Elbaf with a focal point for their anger and grief. And this strategy would have then helped unite the kingdom during a time of mourning, preventing the giants from endangering themselves in a potentially futile attempt to confront the God's Knights or wage war against the world government. Loki's sacrifice would serve to keep the kingdom from further fracturing, allowing them to begin healing from the loss of King Harold without plunging into an unwinnable conflict. I want to go into the broader thematic parallels that could illustrate why Loki's potential actions fit into the recurring narrative of One Piece, where he wouldn't be just an isolated case, as his sacrifice could reflect the struggles and decisions of other key players in the series we've encountered, who also took on the burdens to protect people or their loved ones. And by looking at these parallels, we can get a snapshot of what Oda may want to do with Loki's character and how his story could fit into the series' running themes of sacrifice and selflessness for the greater good. So let's start by looking at the parallel between Loki and Ace, two characters whose stories are deeply tied to their father's legacies. Ace spent so much time rejecting his father's reputation and trying to forge his own path. But despite his desire to escape Roger's shadow, Ace was inevitably pulled into a conflict centered around his lineage, and ultimately he chose to sacrifice himself to protect Luffy, knowing full well that he and the Whitebeard pirates were willing to risk everything to save him. Ace's death was a selfless act to ensure that his loved ones could live on, even if it costed his life. Similarly, Loki would carry the burden of King Harold's legacy in Elbaf. After his father's death, Loki may have had the opportunity to step into his father's role as king. However, he chose to sacrifice his reputation by accepting the blame for Harold's death, and in doing so, Loki would ensure that the warriors of Elbaf would not be tempted to risk their lives by challenging the world government. Both Loki and Hancock may also share a parallel in how they confront their pasts and conceal their true motives to protect their people. Hancock hides her history as a slave to the Celestial Dragons, creating this myth of the Gorgon curse to shield her kingdom from the trauma of her past, and her seemingly cruel exterior is sort of like a defense mechanism to guard against that shame. And similarly, Loki embraces the title of the accursed prince, or the sun god who seeks to destroy the world, choosing to portray himself as a villain, not out of betrayal, but to unite Elbaf under a singular focus, himself. And so by taking the blame of King Harold's death, he protects his people from seeking vengeance against the powerful God's Knights, showing how both characters demonstrate that sometimes maintaining a facade is necessary for the safety of those they care about. Finally, another example that I think is worth mentioning is the thematic connection between Loki and Nami, particularly during the Arlong Park arc, where Nami bears the hatred of her village to protect them from Arlong's rule. Nami joined the Arlong Pirates, where Nami bears the hatred of her entire village to protect them from Arlong's rule. Even though I think the village knew what Nami was doing, but sort of kept up this hating on Nami thing in order to honor Nami's sacrifice, all while hiding her true intentions to buy back her village's freedom. So Nami was carrying the burden of betrayal so that her village can be free one day. She kept her true motives hidden, knowing that revealing them too early would endanger her plan. And if we took a look at Loki facing a similar situation in Elbaf, we see that by accepting the blame for his father's death, Loki becomes the target of his people's anger and shame. He takes on the role of the villain so that the giants of Elbaf don't launch themselves to a dangerous war with the God's Knights and the world government. And much like Nami, Loki would be carrying the burden of being misunderstood to protect those he cares about. And so overall, by allowing himself to be seen as the villain, Loki shields Elbaf from a suicidal conflict with the God's Knights and the world government. His story would be one of selflessness, just like so many other characters in One Piece who bear personal burdens to safeguard their homes and their loved ones. Loki's character has the potential to be tied into one of the deeper themes we've seen time and time again in One Piece. Maybe even the same vein as characters like Joy Boy, who may have bitten off more than he could chew during the Void Century. If you're curious about how this all connects, check out my latest theory video where I dig into how Joy Boy's blood might be the final secret that ties everything together, from the sacrifices to the inherited wills and the ultimate treasure, the One Piece.